In Southern Louisiana, a vicious killer is on the loose, slaughtering his victims in their own homes. The body count rises. Authorities struggle in their search for evidence. They resort to behavioral analysis, hoping to recognize a pattern that will help them identify a sadistic murderer.
Louisiana, a brutal killer turned a rural area into his personal hunting ground. He preyed on the defenseless, the weak, and the elderly. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. The killer would lie in wait, often striking while his victims slept. No one was safe, even in their own homes. Working with police, FBI profilers helped to identify a madman, to catch him before he could strike again.
Laplace, Louisiana, May 9th, 1997. At 9:46 a.m., James Lowell, Jr., a deputy with the St. John's Parish Sheriff's Department, stops by his parents' home. Lowell's sister had called him at work, concerned why their parents aren't answering their phone. The deputy discovers the front door is ajar. He finds his father, James Lowell Sr., on the floor.
Dad! Mom!
His face is covered with blood.
Dad! Mom!
He checks his father's pulse
Dad!
and finds none.
Mom! Mom!
He looks for his mother. He finds her in the kitchen, brutally assaulted.
Mom!
Anne Marie Lowell is unconscious and her pulse is faint, but she's alive.
Dispatch is low! Dispatch is low!
The deputy calls for an ambulance and backup.
My dad's dead, my mom's scared. We both send back her, please. Mom. Oh, Mom.
Within minutes, officers, detectives, and EMTs respond to the scene. The brutal attack shocks Detective Todd Himmel of the St. John Sheriff's Department.
This is a well-respected family in the community, well-known, good people. Most of our homicides are either drug-related or maybe an argument that escalated. To have a home invasion homicide is uncommon for this area. When I first made entry into the house, my first reaction was very gruesome. A tremendous amount of blood on the floor and the walls. The injuries to the victims were quite gruesome.
EMTs work to stabilize Mrs. Lowell for the short trip to River Parish Hospital. Later that day, she dies from her injuries. Deputy Lowell tells investigators how he found his parents. He points out a pair of eyeglasses on the kitchen floor that belonged to his father. Investigators find a blood-stained hammer near Mr. Lowell's body. The nature of the wounds to the victim's head and face lead investigators to believe this is the weapon that killed him. The detectives search the house.
When I made entry into the den area and observed the female's glasses laying on the floor with some blood, it was obvious that she was struck in that area.
Investigators find a large sugarcane knife, sometimes called a side blade or sling blade.
It's covered in blood. It was obvious that it was a weapon that inflicted the injuries on the female victim.
Detectives noticed that several volumes of an encyclopedia have been thrown to the floor.
Blood spots. I'm finished over there. Okay. Ooh, did you see that?
Got money. That's $100 bill right there.
Checking the books still on the shelf, they find the Lowells had hidden nearly $12,000 there.
Just pile them up here.
Family members later confirmed the total. The intruder did not find any of the money. Investigators theorized the killer's search was interrupted.
He was very close to finding the money. Apparently he was scared before he was able to. The son coming home to check on his parents may have scared him off.
Crime scene technicians dust nearly every exposed surface in the house, but the only fingerprints they find match the victims or close family members.
Hey, Tony, come here. I need you to get a couple of pictures of this.
Investigators search the exterior of the house. They discover the phone line, as well as the wires to the alarm, have been cut. And one of the garage windows has been removed.
We're able to determine point of entry, which is the side window. Apparently the suspect had enough time to actually take a knife and remove the putty from a pane of glass from the old wooden windows.
Detective Himmel suspects the killer took his time breaking into the Lowells' home.
The particular location that he had made entry into was camouflaged by a fence and some trees, so in essence, no one would have seen him if they were passing on the road, so he did have time to make entry and to actually whittle away the putty from that window pane before he made entry into the residence.
Investigators spread out to interview the Lowells' neighbors. Although LaPlace is a tight-knit community, nobody has noticed anything unusual. Detectives run background checks on everyone who has recently come in contact with the family. They discover that a handyman hired by the Lowells is an ex-convict. He spent 5 years in prison for manslaughter.
We began an investigation looking into his background. From that point, we kept him under constant surveillance.
3 days later, police bring the handyman in for questioning. He claims he is innocent, but a polygraph exam suggests he is being deceptive.
Anything?
Detectives obtain a warrant to search the suspect's home for clues. Crime technicians use luminol and black lights to hunt for blood evidence. Investigators theorize that the ex-con could have murdered the Lowells and quickly returned to his home. Once there, he inevitably would have deposited small amounts of blood. But their efforts turn up no evidence. Although detectives are unable to connect the suspect to the murders, they continue to keep him under surveillance. 5 days later, Detective Himmel arrives at the scene of a second brutal homicide. Another prominent member of the community has been murdered. Officers responding to a missing persons call discovered the body of 58-year-old Joyce Gilmer in the backyard of her home. According to her family, her car is missing. The victim has 4 bloody lacerations to the back of the head. Detective Himmel immediately suspects that this murder is related to the double homicide.
There were several similarities between the two. Namely, both victims were well known throughout the community, elderly. They either owned or had owned their own business at one point. The weapon of choice was a sharp-edged object.
Investigators now realize they can rule out the possibility that the ex-con is the killer.
He was under constant surveillance at the time that this crime had occurred, so we could eliminate him as being a suspect because we felt strongly that both crimes were related.
Detective Himmel walks through the house looking for signs of an intruder. He finds none until he gets to the master bedroom. It appears as if the killer knew exactly what he wanted. the victim's family reported a safe is missing.
The only room that was disturbed was the master bedroom closet where the safe was located, which indicated to us that the perpetrator knew exactly where to go and knew exactly what he was looking for when he went into the residence. And having knowledge of that, the safe existed inside that master bedroom, it's a good possibility he knew the victim, that it could be one reason that he did murder her is because she knew who he was and could identify him.
The investigators find no evidence of blood inside the house. They conclude that the victim was likely forced into the backyard, where she was murdered. Crime scene investigators process the house for evidence, including hair, fiber, and fingerprints. The killer has been careful. Once again, he has left nothing behind. Later that day, investigators find Mrs. Gilmer's car in the parking lot of a hotel just a few miles from her home. Deputies tow the vehicle to the sheriff's impound lot for analysis.
When the car was found, the keys were still in it, so it was obvious that he had used that area just to dump the vehicle and had gotten into another vehicle, which was either parked there previously or he was picked up by someone.
Crime technicians collect several fingerprints, but they only match the victim and members of the victim's family. For Detective Himmel, the car is another dead end.
We didn't have any physical evidence that could determine who the perpetrator was or even assist us in determining who the perpetrator was.
Investigators review videotapes taken by the hotel's security cameras. Unfortunately, the cameras were not focused on the area where the stolen vehicle was abandoned.
It was a very stressful, very tense moment, trying to determine who's responsible for these crimes, working 20 hours a day, getting 4 hours of sleep a night. It was quite stressful.
With limited resources and almost no evidence to go on, the St. John Sheriff's Department calls the New Orleans field office of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Detectives hope FBI profilers can help identify a vicious killer. Special Agent Dan Funk travels to the scenes of both homicides, starting with the Lowell murders. Investigators are still processing the home 2 weeks after the slayings.
Part of my job, being at the field, at the scene, is to provide all the information that the profiling unit at Quantico needs to do their work. They're not at the scene. I'm the local eyes and ears for that unit. What I do is go to the crime scene, try to absorb as much information as I can, and then provide it back to Quantico.
Agent Funk tries to determine step by step what happened the day of the murder.
I'm looking for pre-offense behavior, offense behavior, and post-offense behavior, which basically means what the subject and the victims did prior to the crime, during the crime, and then after the crime.
Small clues help the agent establish a timeline.
It appeared that the subject spent maybe the whole night in the garage waiting for the victims to wake up. We noticed that because the newspaper was picked up in the morning, and it was the victim's routine to immediately pick up the paper upon rising. And then it looked like there was coffee grounds in the garbage to indicate that they made coffee and were settling down for their morning routine before the attack occurred.
There's one that belongs in the garage.
According to the family, the murder weapon, a cane knife or sling blade, was kept in the garage with other tools. The killer had literally hacked Mrs. Lowell to death with a 40-inch blade that he found in her own garage.
You could see blood on the floor, blood splattered on the walls. You proceeded through the house, and wherever you looked, there was blood. You could just see marks on the walls and on door jambs where you could picture that the subject just swinging this wildly at the victim.
What are you doing? Leave me alone! Leave me alone, Carl!
This was probably the worst crime scene that I've ever seen. And it spread throughout the house, which indicated that There was just an ongoing confrontation between the victims and the subject that just went on and on.
With the discovery of Mrs. Lowell's eyeglasses in the den, investigators believe that was where the killer first encountered his victim. Since her body was located in the kitchen, investigators speculate she was chased there by the intruder. The discovery of Mr. Lowell's eyeglasses on the kitchen floor suggests a possible scenario.
To have Mr. Lowell's glasses in the kitchen, we believe that's the initial point of contact between him and the perpetrator.
Investigators theorize that Mr. Lowell entered the kitchen attempting to defend his wife, but they note his body was found in the hallway.
We believe he was either trying to get another weapon or trying to get to a phone that was in the hallway.
After viewing both the Lowell and Gilmer crime scenes, Agent Funk is confident he has enough information to take to Quantico.
We definitely believe that this was a case that the profiling unit could assist on. There was a lot of interaction between the victim and the subject, and there were a lot of activity that could be used to come up with an offender profile.
But could FBI profilers help identify the killer before he strikes again? In Louisiana, a killer has murdered 3 prominent citizens in a small town. He strikes with extreme violence, but leaves few clues. At FBI headquarters in Quantico, Virginia, Special Agent Dan Funk and local investigators brief FBI profilers on the murders.
He's got the newest case that we're working.
The expert observes that the Lowell crime scene reflects a mixed behavior.
So it's a good two-handed weapon, very sharp. It's not worth anything.
The subject was organized in the burglaries, but disorganized in the murders. The subject brought tools with him to disable alarms and phone lines and to enter the residence, but he was disorganized once he entered it. He didn't bring a weapon with him, but he found weapons of opportunity located at the scene.
Profilers also note that careful planning gave way to extreme violence when the intruder confronted his victims. The brutality of the murders suggests a chaotic personality.
We've got some good stuff here, some good solid police.
But the profiler tells St. John's investigators that he will not be able to create a profile powerful enough based on only 2 incidents.
Solid profile.
They need more data.
We can't just sit around and wait for.
What I am going to suggest is
the profiler's advice to the investigators is to go back and search through their cold case files to look for similar unsolved murders in nearby jurisdictions.
All right, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Investigators from St. John's Sheriff's Department meet with detectives from nearby parishes. The detectives share the details of their cold case files and make a chilling discovery. They find that over the last year, 3 unsolved homicides bear striking similarities to the Lowell and Gilmer murders. Records show that 8 months earlier, in nearby Ascension Parish, the owner of an auto repair shop was beaten to death with an aluminum baseball bat. A substantial amount of money was stolen from the victim's home.
He's in his late 50s. He owns an auto repair shop in my district. It happened about a year before your double murder.
5 months later, in St. James Parish, a 58-year-old woman was stabbed and beaten to death in her home. Police found a bloody knife in the sink. They were unable to recover any fingerprints from the weapon or at the scene.
Photos. They had a 58-year-old woman.
Less than 3 weeks later, also in Ascension Parish, a 71-year-old woman was beaten and stabbed to death in her bedroom. The victim was stabbed multiple times and bludgeoned with a trophy. Detectives found an open safe in a bedroom closet. The contents, value unknown, had been removed.
What was strange was she was found under an overturned couch.
Phone lines and alarm wires to the residence had been cut. Investigators conclude that as many as 6 homicides may have been committed by the same killer. But before the task force can ask the FBI to review the new data and create a more detailed profile, there is another attack. Shortly after 4 o'clock in the morning, on July 7th, 1997, detectives from the Ascension Parish Sheriff's Department arrive at the home of Vincent and Julie Roland. A uniformed officer briefs Sergeant Detective Mike Toney.
The sheriff's office responded to the 911 call that we received. After the sheriff's office patrol division arrived at the residence, they learned that there was a home invasion. It was a brutal attack. It was a vicious attack upon two elderly people of the community.
Detective Toney learns the couple sustained severe lacerations and gunshot wounds. Miraculously, they are both alive. The next day, Toney visits the hospital and learns that both victims have been stabilized. The doctor tells investigators that dozens of .410 gauge shotgun pellets were removed from the face, neck, and chest areas of both victims. If the Rolands had been struck by larger gauge ammunition, they might not have survived. Among his injuries, Mr. Roland has a large knife wound and shotgun blast to his face.
It was remarkable that he was able to talk and give us information. He was determined to give this information because he wanted his attacker caught. And he gave a wealth of information as to how the attack took place.
The man tells investigators he and his wife were in bed, asleep.
It was around 2 or so in the morning. He was awakened when this large 30-pound rock was thrown upon his face. As he rises up out of the bed, the attacker starts hitting him in the facial area with the side blade. He tries to defend himself from the attack.
The man struck him with the sling blade over and over again. Mr. Roland said he was ordered to open a safe that was in the bedroom closet. He told the man he couldn't open the safe because he was hurt too badly. He and his wife were forced into the bathroom.
The combination of the safe.
To buy time, he intentionally gave his attacker the wrong combination.
36, 4, 34. Wrong answer. That's not the combination.
He ordered Mrs. Roland to open the safe or he would kill them both.
Go! 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 Open the safe. Let's go, you're taking forever. Open it up! Back up.
The safe contained over $100,000 in cash. After cleaning out the safe,
Stay there, I'll kill you.
the intruder moved to the opposite side of the house.
No, it's all right. Stay here.
Mr. Roland could see him through the bathroom window.
All right. Stay there.
Don't go.
No, stay here. I'll take care of this.
He left the bathroom and went for the chest in the bedroom closet where he kept 2 guns. He hid behind the sofa and waited. He had taken the wrong revolver.
No.
The one he kept loaded was still in the closet. The intruder had found a shotgun in a gun cabinet.
No.
Mr. Roland was hit in the face.
He laid there pretending to be dead, at which time he heard someone walk up to him, which he didn't realize it was his wife. He hears a second shot goes off, and then he realizes his wife has just been shot.
Mrs. Roland tells investigators that she laid still until the intruder left. She then tried to call 911, but the phone line had been cut. Terrified and bleeding, she managed to drive to her son's house, where he called the police. Ascension Parish detectives share details of the Roland statements with investigators. They are confident the attack is connected to the homicides they are investigating.
They were linked due to the type of home invasion it was. The perpetrator entered the residence through a window. Prior to opening the window, he had cut the phone wires to the residence, which would disable the alarm system. And then after entering the residence, seeking a weapon of opportunity, and then attacking the victims while they were in the house.
The detectives also note similarities in the killer's victims.
They were all elderly and owned businesses, and they were wealthy.
The Rolands are the only people who have come face to face with this brutal killer and lived to tell about it. Investigators return to the hospital with a sketch artist who creates a composite drawing of the suspect based on the Roland's eyewitness description.
They described him as a white male with kind of shaggy-looking hair, thin, very authoritative voice. They described his voice as being of a person from the River Parish, from this area, as far as having a strong South Louisiana accent.
Investigators released the composite drawing of the assailant to the local news media. The wanted man is described as being a white male in his 20s or 30s, of average height with medium build and sandy blonde hair. Now, law enforcement from 3 Louisiana jurisdictions finally have their first lead in identifying a ruthless killer. An elderly Louisiana couple narrowly survives a brutal assault on their lives. Their attacker has been linked to 6 murders in 10 months. Now the suspected serial killer is on the loose with over $100,000 in cash.
Gentlemen, this will happen.
Armed with the survivors' statements, Louisiana investigators returned to Quantico, Virginia to present the newly linked cases to the FBI's profiling unit. The profilers agree that the 6 homicides in the latest attack are most likely all connected. They suspect the killer lives or works in the area. He is nocturnal, and he may have recently purchased items he normally could not afford. The investigators now have a rough sketch of their suspect, but they need to move fast if they are to catch him. FBI Special Agent Dan Funk.
Now you had 2 live witnesses, subjects under pressure to believe that there's people out there who can identify him. So we believe that either he would change his appearance, or he might even leave the area.
We've got several good...
The profilers recommend forming an official task force and asking the public to look out for anyone exhibiting any of the characteristics identified by the unit.
That's what we're going to recommend. We can do that.
The public appeal prompts thousands of phone calls to the task force hotline. A security guard from a local video poker casino provides an intriguing lead. He tells a detective that one of the regular customers at the casino looks a lot like the composite drawing he saw on TV. Detective Mike Toney of the Ascension Sheriff's Department.
He described the individual as a person who, before these attacks, would come in there and spend very little money. Poor dresser. Since the attacks, he would come in, he would spend a lot of money. He would then started sporting jewelry, riding a new motorcycle, basically changed his appearance.
But the security guard does not know the customer's name.
He gave a description of the person, what he looked like, as well as the vehicle that he was driven. And this vehicle was very unique. It was actually a truck, a large truck with a large boom on the back of it that was used to like lift motors and stuff and carry them around.
The detective reviews the security guard's recorded statement with the rest of the task force. His description of the customer's behavior is consistent with the profiler's analysis. Hearing the security guard's remarks about the customer's truck, a detective realizes he knows the man being described.
A pickup truck, it had a homemade hoist on the back of it.
The customer is an auto mechanic who once worked for a friend of his, the same man who had been beaten to death with a baseball bat in his home 6 months earlier. A murder linked to their suspect.
Yeah, there's a handful of them.
The mechanic's name is Daniel Blank. Blank is a former employee of an auto repair shop owned by the victim. He was one of 36 people police interviewed in connection with that crime. Although he had voluntarily given a statement to the police, detectives found nothing suspicious. A check of his record reveals one prior arrest for a minor theft in St. James Parish.
That's one side. Anybody want to go out and talk to him?
Investigators traveled to Daniel Blank's last known residence to ask him some questions. A woman answers the door. She says she is the mother of Sonia Radford, Daniel Blank's girlfriend.
She advised us that Daniel Blank and his girlfriend had just moved to Texas, that he wasn't there. Left my information with her. If she would speak to him after we leave, would she give the information to him that we needed to talk to him?
Very important that he gets up with us. Okay? We greatly appreciate that. All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
10 minutes after Detective Tony returns to his office, he receives a telephone call.
Detective Tony.
It is Daniel Blank.
Hey, listen, can I put you on hold just a second?
He says he is calling from Onalaska, Texas.
And while I'm on the phone with him, I advised him that we were investigating several homicides of elderly people. And from those homicides, a large amount of money was stolen from these people. And he just started being a wealth of information. He started talking about how he was gambling, that he was winning a lot of money, that he had all the receipts for his gambling winnings. And during the conversation, he tells me that he will be back in Louisiana within a few days. So it was set up where he would come and meet with us when he came back into Louisiana.
Okay, Daniel. Well, please call me as soon as you get back here, okay?
All right. Thank you. All right.
But Daniel Blank has no intention of returning to Louisiana. So investigators will have to go and find him. In Louisiana, authorities identify a suspect in a series of brutal murders. But as the investigation heats up, the suspect moves to a small town in the neighboring state of Texas. Federal agents in Louisiana contact Special Agent Rick Locke at the FBI's Lufkin, Texas resident agency. Agent Locke often works undercover, so his identity must be protected.
Anytime that there's a case that would involve the violent death of a number of people and the possibility of a serial killer on the loose, that would be moved to a #1 priority.
Agent Locke asks Lieutenant Detective Mike Nettles from the Polk County Sheriff's Department to locate and surveil Daniel Blank. Nettles searches local utility records and finds Blank living with his girlfriend, Sonia Radford, in a trailer park in Onalaska.
Once we identified him, then we started working on trying to build a case to see, was he spending a lot of money? Did he have a lot of money? Because we knew that there was a lot of money taken from some of the murder scenes in South Louisiana.
Special Agent Locke and Detective Nettles keep the suspect under a close watch.
When we were conducting the surveillance of Blank, we did notice that he had purchased a vehicle since he had arrived in Texas. He had purchased a trailer home. He then leased a automobile repair shop business and opened a business known as Daniel's Automotive.
Public records reveal that Blank has leased the garage in his girlfriend's name. After surveilling Blank for nearly 2 weeks, Agent Locke and Deputy Nettles meet with the Louisiana Task Force and a Texas U.S. attorney. The investigators brief the prosecutor on the results of a financial background check on Daniel Blank.
He was spending a large amount of money, which fit the behavioral profile. After doing a financial background on him, we learned that in this year where he was spending all this money, he had no means of income that was showing up on his state employment records.
Tony, please.
During an earlier phone conversation with Blank, Detective Tony broached the subject of his income.
And that's when he started going into his gambling habits. All the money that I got, I won from gambling. So we had a person who was spending literally thousands of dollars at local gambling casinos. And then after doing the background and financial records through the casinos, we learned that he was actually spending more money than he was winning. So he was actually in the negative for his gambling records.
In addition to his massive gambling losses, Blank has purchased an SUV, a car, a new motorcycle, 2 trailer lots for $22,000, a $14,000 trailer, and a $4,000 above-ground swimming pool. Records reveal that most of the purchases were made with cash. The prosecutor agrees that the circumstantial evidence is impressive, but investigators have not produced any evidence that places Blank at any of the crime scenes or that connects him to a weapon. If investigators hope to make their case against Blank, they need hard, physical evidence. In Louisiana, technicians have recovered many latent fingerprints from the crime scenes. Analysts have matched most of the prints to the victims and their family members. Technicians compare the remaining unknown prints to a set of Daniel Blank's fingerprints, obtained during an arrest for an earlier minor violation. They determined that the prints do not match, but Blank's old record is incomplete. There are no palm prints in his file. And investigators have several palm prints from the crime scenes listed as unknown. The investigators devise a plan to obtain a set of palm prints from Daniel Blank. Through a records check, Detective Nettles and Agent Locke have learned that Blank does not have a valid driver's license. After weeks of surveillance, they have observed that Blank has a habit of running a particular stop sign near his business. The plan is for Nettles to perform a traffic stop the next time he does.
Driver's license registration?
I don't have my license on me.
As predicted, Blank is unable to produce a valid driver's license.
My license expired.
Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and have to go down to the courthouse.
Is all this really necessary, you think?
Walk around the side of the car.
Yeah.
Nettles places him under arrest and takes him to the Polk County Sheriff's Office. During the booking process, officers take a full set of finger and palm prints from Blank. If the palm prints match the prints at any of the Louisiana crime scenes, investigators will have the evidence they need to obtain an indictment. Blank pays a $50 fine and is released. At the fingerprint lab, technicians compare the palm prints to latent prints collected at the crime scenes. In case after case, the results are negative. They do not match. All the prints collected at the crime scenes either belong to family members, victims, or remain unknown. So for now, suspected serial killer Daniel Blank will remain free. In Louisiana, 6 people are dead, the victims of a vicious killer. An intense investigation has revealed a prime suspect, but no hard evidence to tie him to the crimes. The suspect is volatile. Investigators have to get him off the streets. Now the only person who can provide the evidence they need is the suspect himself. FBI Special Agent Rick Locke.
It was decided that we must continue the case by planning for a detailed interview with Blank, as well as conducting a search of his properties. We were looking for any evidence which would definitely link him to the crimes in Louisiana.
Investigators served Daniel Blank with warrants to search his business and home. Detective Nettles asks Blank if he will come to the courthouse for a voluntary interview. He agrees. Blank is not arrested, but he is advised of his Miranda rights.
No, I
Have any problems with that?
No, go ahead.
Louisiana detectives Mike Toney and Todd Himmel conduct the critical interview.
A little bit about yourself.
It's a lot of pressure. You know that you either get a confession and solve these cases or you don't, and you have nothing. We had no physical evidence, and the circumstantial evidence wasn't that great to bring him to trial. We knew we needed a confession. We knew we needed him to tell us that he was responsible for killing these people. Without that, we had nothing. Our strategy was to first begin with background information with Daniel, asking questions that we knew the answer to. His family life, his education, his work background, that probably consumed an hour and a half. We then moved on to covering some of the homicides. The interview started to get interesting, I'd say probably within the third hour. At that point, we had challenged him on some of these homicides. We had asked him if he thought it odd that 2 of his former employers were deceased.
But I damn sure didn't kill him. I didn't kill him.
At that point, he became a little agitated. We were walking a fine line. We didn't want to upset him where he would walk out. He was not under arrest. He could have left at any moment.
But it wasn't me. I don't have nothing.
Blank continues to deny any involvement in the murders. It appears unlikely that he will confess to anything. Down the hall, investigators question Blank's girlfriend, Sonia Radford. She has also agreed to a voluntary interview.
Investigating several homicides.
It was entirely a consensual interview. She was free to leave. The interviewers approached her and asked if she would willingly visit with them in an interview room at the courthouse, and that was done. She did agree.
Sonia tells investigators she stayed out of Daniel's affairs, but she does admit he would often go out at night without telling her where he was going. Sonia also admits that a couple of times she dropped him off around the areas where the murders had been committed. Blank always told her he was going to repair someone's car. Sonia tells investigators she never wanted to believe Daniel was involved. A few doors down, Blank continues to deny any responsibility for the crimes.
I need you to go on record. I'd like you to take a polygraph, if that's okay with you.
He even agrees to take a polygraph exam.
Just answer yes or no.
I believe he agreed to take the polygraph because he needed to give the appearance that he was cooperative and that he wanted us to believe he was innocent.
The examiner asks Blank if he ever struck Mrs. Gilmer, the elderly woman found outside her home. Blank answers
No.
After 3 tests, The polygraph examiner reports that Blank is exhibiting deceptive behaviors. He is most likely not telling the truth. Blank is beginning to show signs of stress. His interrogators decide to further destabilize him by introducing an emotional subject, the recent death of his mother.
My father was going to help.
I could tell that his relationship was close with his mother. From that point, I just discussed his upbringing. He came from a large family.
I helped her as much as I could.
I knew it wasn't easy for him because of the size of the family and both parents trying to provide food and support and housing for their children.
Daniel, did you love your mother?
Yeah.
If she were alive today and you were involved in these murders, do you think she'd want you to do the right thing?
Yeah.
Did you mean to kill Mrs. Gilmore?
No.
That was very important. That was the first admission that he had made that he was responsible for committing that crime.
Once Blank begins to confess, he doesn't stop. He ultimately admits to 6 homicides and 2 attempted murders. He tells Detective Himmel about his first murder, which occurred 8 months before the St. John's double homicide. Blank tells investigators he worked for the victim and claimed the man owed him money for a job he had done. He says he entered his boss's home and found him asleep on the couch. He tried to take his wallet, but the man woke up. Blank claims the man attacked him with a baseball bat. When he slipped and fell, Blank got a hold of the bat and started hitting back. He didn't stop beating the man until he was dead. Blank said he took $800 or $900 from the man's pockets.
I lost.
He knew what he was doing was wrong. He knew the difference between right and wrong. And I believe after that first homicide, it just became easier and easier every time it occurred again.
In his confession, Blank consistently claims he acted in self-defense.
I shot them.
He insists that all 6 murder victims attacked him first.
So he was trying to kill you?
They were trying to kill me.
I appreciate you being honest.
Blank's interpretation may be self-serving, but his memory of the crime scenes is nearly photographic.
The recollection was amazing. The amount of detail he was able to remember, being able to draw diagrams of the homes, draw diagrams of weapons that he used. His attention to detail was amazing.
The confession continues for 13 hours.
By the time he got to the end, he was very comfortable, drinking his soft drink, smoking a cigarette, very comfortable, nonchalantly discussing these crimes in detail.
Authorities in Texas arrest Daniel Blank on murder charges and then extradite him to Louisiana to face trial. Daniel Blank is convicted of 5 homicides and receives 3 life terms and 2 death sentences. He is currently on death row at the Louisiana State Penitentiary at Angola. The state of Louisiana decides not to pursue charges for the 6th homicide and attempted murders, confident that Daniel Blank will never leave this place alive. Two deadly fugitives are on the run from justice. Authorities follow an electronic trail and chase the escaped convict and his partner from state to state. The suspects are moving fast, determined to avoid capture. The police and FBI must track them down before they take another life.
Pennsylvania, an inmate escaped with the help of his female accomplice. Following a trail of fraudulent credit card receipts and death, authorities tracked the pair, but always find themselves one step behind. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. The FBI and police race to capture the deadly couple, who seem to be running with no direction, no sense of fear, and nothing to lose.
10-7 investigation, Eddie and Bo.
September 25th, 1993. Friends of 74-year-old Guy Goodman contact the Palmyra, Pennsylvania police. They're concerned because they have not heard from him in over a week. Goodman's landlord meets an officer at his rented house.
You have a key for the door there?
I do.
Okay, let's go check it out.
Okay.
You just want to step back there?
All right.
The officer observes shards of broken porcelain on the floor and dried blood on the floor and walls. Blood spatter trails down the hall and leads to the basement stairs. In a storage room, he discovers a body. The officer calls for assistance.
Headquarters, code 3, requesting backup.
Tri-party clerical.
Unit 1833, go ahead.
Detective Paul Zeckman of the Lebanon County Detective Bureau takes the lead in the investigation.
Affirm, go ahead.
10-4, I'll be en route to that location.
The countywide bureau helps township police departments with major crime investigations.
It was evident that the house had been ransacked. The kitchen drawers were open, things were strewn around on the floor. Going down into the basement area, you could see drag marks led from the stairway to a small storage room.
The crime scene is gruesome. The victim's hands and feet are tied behind his back. Several layers of plastic bags, sheets, and blankets enshroud his head. Coverings are tightened at his neck with makeshift bindings.
These items were either duct taped or tied with electrical cords. The plastic bag was duct taped over the cloth covering.
Hoping to find a trace of the perpetrator, crime scene investigators carefully process the house. They dust every surface for latent fingerprints and collect a roll of duct tape left on a table. Likely the same tape used in the bindings. With no witnesses, only the careful examination of every item can help the detectives understand this crime.
We were trying to not only obtain the forensic evidence, but we were also trying to determine if any of the property was taken from the residence. We were able to establish that Mr. Goodman's wallet was missing.
They find American Express charge statements.
Oh.
But the card itself is missing.
Statement here. The account numbers get that all figured.
In the bedroom, investigators discover an open box of checks.
A series of checks from the middle of this box had been removed. We also knew that the vehicle of Mr. Goodman was also missing at this point. What do you have to do out here yet?
Guy Goodman seemed like an unlikely target for this type of attack. Like most of the Palmyra, Pennsylvania community, Chief Michael Wayman knew of the victim.
Guy Goodman was a retired florist.
He was a lifelong resident of the Palmyra area, well known within the community and liked by everyone in the community. It was apparent that either the motive for this crime was a robbery that had gone bad, or that there was a robbery after the fact, after Mr. Goodman was assaulted and died.
Palmyra, Pennsylvania is located in Lebanon County. This peaceful community sees fewer than 3 murders per year. In most cases, the victim knows the killer. At the autopsy, the victim's face is unrecognizable. The medical examiner uses dental records to confirm it is Guy Goodman. Based on the body's decomposition, he concludes Goodman has been dead for about a week. Although the victim was severely beaten, his wounds were not fatal. An examination of his respiratory tract reveals he died slowly from suffocation. Latent prints recovered from Goodman's house are processed at the lab. Examiners check the prints against local arrest records and find a match. When the forensics report arrives on Zekman's desk, he isn't surprised by the results.
Fingerprints that we had obtained at the crime scene matched Bradley Martin.
Zekman knows the name all too well.
I just entered him as a wanted person, charging him with the escape from the county prison, so I knew he was on the run.
Many of Lebanon County's inmates are part of a work release program. Bradley Martin, a repeat thief and drug user, is one of these work release prisoners. Over a week earlier, Martin used a 2-hour pass, a weekly perk of the work release program, to meet his new girlfriend, Carolyn King. 27-year-old King worked at a factory where she met the 21-year-old work release prisoner. When Martin failed to return, prison officials launched a fugitive investigation. They called the Lebanon County Detective Bureau. After obtaining a fugitive warrant for Martin, the detectives checked Carolyn King's apartment, concerned for her well-being. But King is not there, and they find nothing to indicate where she has gone, or even if she is with Martin. The detectives entered Martin in NCIC, the National Criminal Information Center. Once the murder of Guy Goodman is discovered, there is a greater urgency to find Martin than to determine if Carolyn King is unharmed. The detectives interview Martin's friends and co-workers. What they learn surprises them.
Through interviews, we were able to establish that Bradley Martin and Carolyn King were together several days after Guy Goodman was murdered. We were able to establish that they were together in the Palmyra area, and then it was just blank.
Detectives face the possibility that Carolyn King may be Martin's accomplice. Earlier, when Detective Zekman ran a statewide background check on King, she came up clean. He tries again, this time using a national database. He learns she has a long criminal history, including theft and check forgery. She has outstanding warrants for her arrest and is also a suspect in 2 murders in Virginia. The detectives have no idea where the 2 suspects are. If they left town right after the Goodman murder, they have more than a week's head start. Detectives hope to track the suspects using the American Express charge card and the checks stolen from the victim's home.
Okay, let me call a guy at the American Express Security Department.
That's great.
Detective Wayman asks American Express Global Security in New York to help. Joe Gannon, the chief investigator in Amex Security, works to assist the police.
And I'll be back to you as soon as I can.
Got it. Thanks. We flagged Mr. Goodman's account because he was the victim of a homicide, and the chances were that the perpetrators of that homicide were in possession of that card.
A review of Goodman's account shows purchases made after Goodman's death. The transactions leave a trail that may lead to Goodman's killer.
We discovered that the charges began in western Pennsylvania and continued out through the Ohio Valley, down into Iowa and Kansas, and then they turned north. And the last transaction we had on record was in Rapid City, South Dakota.
Armed with a solid lead, the Pennsylvania detectives waste no time. They catch the next available flight to Rapid City, South Dakota. The killers had disappeared. But the victim's charge card had become the investigators' best informant. Police hope the trail of surfacing transactions will lead them to the murderers. Within hours, the Pennsylvania detectives arrive in Rapid City. Accompanied by local police, they visit the last stores where the charge card was used. Interviews with clerks verify their suspicions.
Up until this point, we were speculating that Bradley Martin and Carolyn King were the two people that were using Goodman's American Express card.
Then, investigators catch their first real break.
Some of the individuals were able to identify Bradley Martin as the user of the card. Some were able to identify Carolyn King as the user of the card.
The revelation confirms their theory.
It was no longer a whodunit. We knew for certain who had done it. Now it was a matter of changing the focus of the investigation to apprehending them.
The Pennsylvania detectives circulate photos and detailed information about the suspects to all South Dakota law enforcement agencies. The Rapid City Police Fraud Unit, or Bunko Squad, tells them of an interracial couple who've been passing bad checks at local stores.
Rapid City Police Department had a black and white bunco team who were trying to do a con game within the area. It was a black female and a white male driving a vehicle with Virginia plates. We knew that this fit the description of Carolyn King and Bradley Martin. We knew that Carolyn King had a vehicle with Virginia plates. We felt that they were there working in the Rapid City area.
Driver's license registration, please.
The Pennsylvania detectives assist as Rapid City police pull over the couple in the car with Virginia plates. They confirm the couple is the team Rapid City detectives have been hunting, but not the suspected killers.
The black female and the white male were in fact not Martin and King. They were just simply another couple that matched the description and who were doing their own criminal activities.
American Express informs the detectives there have been no new charges in over a week. The investigation appears to be back at the beginning with no leads.
Okay, what I can do for you is give you...
But King and Martin are having trouble using their murder victims' out-of-state checks.
Let me get my manager for you, ma'am.
They need another source of cash. Their next victim, a 59-year-old woman traveling alone, Donna Martz.
What are you doing?
The terrified woman complies when they force her to take them to her car. The next day, the Pennsylvania detectives learn that someone passed several of Guy Goodman's checks in North Dakota.
The bank had cleared checks written in a number of locations in the Bismarck, North Dakota area.
This supports the detective's theory.
They had used the credit card. Now they were utilizing the checks stolen from Guy Goodman at the time of his homicide that further validated that they had to have been the persons who committed the homicide.
Detective Allender, please.
Zeckman phones authorities in Bismarck from the road.
I'm Sergeant Zeckman from Lebanon County, Pennsylvania. I made contact with a detective within the Bismarck Police Department. I told him of locations that I had checks passed, and I gave him a rundown of the Guy Goodman homicide and who was involved and what evidence we had discovered up to this point. And there was a long pause from the detective. And I asked him what was wrong, and he said, well, we're investigating a missing persons from that same hotel where one of these Goodman checks were passed.
Donna Martz's family called police when she did not return home from Bismarck. They described Martz and her Chrysler New Yorker. Police comb Bismarck for any sign of Martz or her car, but find nothing. The detectives fear Martin and King have grabbed Donna Martz. The case has a new urgency. A woman's life is at stake. Police investigate the death of 74-year-old retired florist Guy Goodman, who was severely beaten, then murdered in his rural Pennsylvania home. Investigators determined that the victim's charge card and a book of checks were stolen. Fingerprints at the scene identify two likely perpetrators: 21-year-old Bradley Martin and his 27-year-old girlfriend, Carolyn King. Pennsylvania detectives Paul Zeckman and Michael Wayman follow the pair of fugitives to Bismarck, North Dakota, and learn authorities there are investigating the disappearance of a woman from the same hotel where one of Goodman's checks was passed. Donna Martz, a traveling tour guide for an interstate bus line, was last seen at the hotel where the suspects were staying. When Martz didn't arrive home as scheduled, her family reported her missing. Local authorities issue an APB on Martz's Chrysler New Yorker. The Bismarck FBI joins the case, led by Special Agent Craig Welkin.
The FBI and the North Dakota Bureau of Criminal Investigation set up a task force which was joined by other agencies, including the Bismarck Police Department and the local Sheriff's Department.
When the Pennsylvania detectives arrive in Bismarck, they share the information on the fugitives that they gathered over the past week.
They became an integral part of the task force on this case. The linking of King and Martin was very critical in the investigation.
With potential suspects identified in the abduction of Donna Martz, the task force still struggles for viable leads. They continue to search the hotel.
We spoke with the clerks at the hotel in Bismarck where Donna Martz was last seen. And they were able to tell us that Bradley Martin and Carolyn King had stayed at the same hotel.
Hotel personnel also recall that around 9 a.m. on September 26th, King and Donna Martz were only a few feet apart.
They were able to confirm that Carolyn King had been in the lobby at the same time that Donna Martz was in the small dining area having her continental breakfast.
No one noticed Martz leaving the hotel with anyone, but investigators fear she's been kidnapped. Now they need to find out where the fugitives went next. Then, police discover Guy Goodman's car, abandoned, outside Bismarck. There is no sign of Donna Martz. and the search reveals only receipts from stores along the suspect's route and several unused checks bearing Goodman's name. Once again, the suspects have left authorities with no leads. FBI Special Agent Craig Welkin knows they must find Martz before her kidnappers decide to kill her.
Everybody in an investigation like this is extremely busy. Lots of information coming in, including information that really is extraneous, but you don't know that at the time. So there's a lot of sifting and sorting of information, a lot of trying to prioritize and make sure that your primary emphasis is in the right direction to recover the victim alive and well and apprehend the suspects.
Sleepless hours pass with no leads. Then, a break. Working with Donna Martz's bank, detectives learn her credit card was used in a shopping mall more than 100 miles away.
She had no relatives out there. There was just absolutely no reason for her to go that way.
The MO matches that of Goodman's killers.
Martz's credit card started showing charges on it a day or so after she had gone missing. We were fairly certain that she was not the one doing the charges.
The FBI dispatches teams to interview sales clerks at the mall. None of the clerks can positively identify Martin or King as the user of the card. But they are sure Martz did not make the purchases, which were for young men's clothing.
When you're working the case, you become very much aware that the clock is working against you, particularly when you have a situation like this where we know that Guy Goodman was murdered.
The next significant lead comes when Martz's account posts a withdrawal in Montana. It occurred days earlier at an ATM in the small town of Shelby. Montana FBI agents bring the ATM surveillance tape to the command post in Bismarck. Detectives Wayman and Zeckman positively identify Bradley Martin using Martz's credit card. It is the first definitive proof linking the suspects to Donna Martz. The tape confirms Martin and King traveled west, but there is still no sign of Martz. The evidence is building. Yet investigators' main concern is not prosecution, but finding Donna alive.
And although we had an ideal that they were heading in a general direction of west, they could change that direction at any time. So it was very frustrating because we felt that there was a short time frame in which, if Donna Martz was still alive, that we would be able to apprehend them and save her.
Special Agent Welkin knows they must speed up the process of tracking the victim's credit card usage.
I contacted Ben Patty, a retired FBI special agent who was employed by a major credit card company issuing Donna Martz's card.
At Visa's San Francisco headquarters, International Fraud Control Director Ben Patty agrees to help.
Normally, when a cardholder uses their credit card, that bank that issued the card will not see that transaction information for 2 to 3 days. That's when it's posted, and the bank would then know where the transaction occurred. Craig Welkin was really wanting to find out when the card that belonged to Donna Martz was used in real time, which we could not do with the systems as they were at that time.
To locate the suspects the instant they use the card, Visa must create a complex reporting system for a single credit card. But Donna Martz's life is on the line.
We contacted the systems people in the computer center and explained to them what we wanted. They said, okay, we'll go into our systems, make the necessary changes in the mainframe computer so that this specific cardholder number could be captured as it came through our systems.
The programmers estimate it will take at least 24 hours to create and implement the new program. FBI agents hope that the computer program will finally put them closer to the murder suspects and to Donna Martz before she too is killed. The coroner for Lebanon County, Pennsylvania, determined that retired florist Guy Goodman was savagely beaten and then slowly suffocated to death. His face was unrecognizable at the autopsy. The suspects, 21-year-old Bradley Martin and 27-year-old Carolyn King, have more than 20 felony convictions between them and are now fugitives on the run across the heartland of America. Authorities believe the couple is holding their latest victim, Donna Martz, captive and using her credit cards. The last charge was recorded in Montana. The FBI and police from across the country are in pursuit, tracking the suspects through the victim's credit card usage. Investigators remain one step behind. Led by Special Agent Craig Welkin.
That was due to the flow of the information from the merchants to the credit card company, and then when that information was actually available from the computer database.
In 1993, banking computers take days to post each transaction. Investigators await a new Visa program that will trap any activity on Martz's card. Pennsylvania detective Paul Zeckman chased the pair from the beginning of their flight.
It was very frustrating being days behind locating places that Martz's credit card had been used, because we knew that, number one, this couple had killed Guy Goodman. We knew that Donna Martz potentially was going to be the next victim. If she had not already been killed, there's nothing we could do more than what we were doing to try and locate them and stop this from happening.
Investigators try to estimate where the suspects will go next. They alert all law enforcement agencies on the suspects' possible routes. They post descriptions of the suspects in their vehicle in the National Crime Information Center's nationwide database.
We entered both Bradley Martin and Carolyn King in NCIC. They were also entered in as kidnapping suspects. In addition to that, regional messages had gone out to all the police departments to be on the lookout for Donna Martz, Carolyn King, or Bradley Martin.
If any police force in the country runs into the couple, the Bismarck Task Force will be notified. To further increase their chances, investigators fax descriptions of the suspects and the victim to police agencies along Martin and King's likely routes. But there are no incoming leads beyond the sporadic credit card purchases. Detectives Wayman and Zeckman returned to Pennsylvania to re-interview everyone who knows the fugitives. They hope Martin and King have made contact with someone back home.
We continually talked to individuals in the Palmyra area who were associates of Bradley Martin, trying to find out if there was recent contact with him or Carolyn King. If there was, where were they at? Where did they call from?
But no one offers new information. Despite every effort, investigators still have nothing. The FBI receives an update from the Visa Corporation in San Francisco.
This is Ben Patty, Visa International.
Visa fraud investigator and former Special Agent Ben Patty had asked the company's systems programmers for a way to trace Martz's credit card transactions as they are made.
And I told the FBI, and we set up a system of contact between our systems people in Virginia, myself, and in the FBI and their command post. After the system was in place, the first transaction that came through was a service station gas transaction in Southern California.
It was in Los Angeles several hours earlier. Investigators are closer, but still too far behind. While the task force notifies authorities in the LA area, Visa gets another hit on Donna Martz's card.
The transaction came through our systems in real time. As soon as it came through the systems, we notified the FBI's command post, and it would have been within our 2-hour time that the transaction actually occurred.
Then a transaction is made at a hotel in National City outside San Diego. Agents at the command post contact the FBI's San Diego field office. And the lead goes to Supervisory Special Agent Sam Stanton.
We received information that the Donna Martz credit card had been used at the hotel in National City. So immediately I dispatched agents over to the hotel off of Interstate 5. Agents interviewed the manager and the security guard and employees at the hotel and was able to determine that a couple matching Martin and King had stayed at the hotel using Donna Martz's credit card.
But the couple checked out 2 hours earlier, paying for the room with the Visa. Police officers and FBI agents swarmed the area, checking hotel parking lots, convenience stores, and gas stations for Donna Martz's Chrysler New Yorker or any sign of Martin and King. Special Agent Stanton knows finding the car is a long shot, especially when that car has a 2-hour lead on authorities.
Where San Diego is a very large city, and to try to find a vehicle in a city that size would be almost impossible. But we did put out an all-points bulletin and notified the state judicial police and the federal police in Mexico and the Border Patrol, thinking that maybe the individuals were headed toward Mexico.
The Tijuana border is the busiest in the world. In 1993, nearly 40,000 Americans cross into Mexico every day without having to show even an ID. If the fugitives make it past the border, it is unlikely they will ever be found.
All right. I know it's been a couple of days, but have you heard from Brad or Carolyn?
Well,
Then, the Pennsylvania detectives finally catch a break that narrows the search.
And what do you have to say?
According to Chief Michael Wayman,
We received information from an associate of Bradley Martin's, indicating that they had received a phone call from Bradley, and that Bradley was in San Diego, that he was with Carolyn King, and that they were headed back towards Pennsylvania. We took that information. We notified the San Diego office of the FBI, and they in turn notified the California Highway Patrol.
the fugitives made the call as they checked out of the hotel in San Diego. Martin and King still have a 2-hour lead, but authorities continue closing the gap. Soon a hunch and a bit of luck will bring the investigation to a violent and dangerous conclusion. Fall 1993. Authorities chase Bradley Martin and Carolyn King, suspected of murder in Pennsylvania and kidnapping in North Dakota. Investigators from both states are frustrated that for weeks they have been one step behind the suspects. They hope to find the pair before the abducted woman, Donna Martz, is killed. Then a new program created by the Visa Corporation at the FBI's request puts investigators only 2 hours behind the suspects.
Someplace.
Investigators learn the two have just checked out of a San Diego area hotel. Based on their checkout time and the tip that the fugitives are heading east, FBI agents try to estimate their position. Special Agent Stanton has a hunch that the suspects will use Interstate 8, the southernmost highway going east. he determines that Martin and King will soon be approaching El Centro, California, near the Arizona border.
I called Agent Paul Vick in the El Centro office of the FBI and asked him to send out an all-points bulletin.
Stanton hopes he has picked the right route, as El Centro Special Agent Paul Vick takes it from there.
I called the California Highway Patrol dispatchers and asked them to broadcast the Martz's car description.
Wanted for murder that just left a hotel in San Diego, and we suspect they might be headed east on Interstate 8. We need them stopped.
The all-points bulletin about 187 suspects, police code for murder, is transmitted to every officer on Interstate 8, including California Highway Patrolman Richard Chambers.
CHP unit El Centro continuing standby copy information on 187 suspects possibly en route to El Centro.
I went and checked my section of the freeway like I normally would in the beginning of my shift, and I went west on Interstate 8.
As Chambers drives, he receives the suspect's descriptions.
First suspect is a Bradley Martin, white male, 6 foot 160. Second subject is a Carolyn King, black female, wanted by the FBI.
Within minutes, Chambers believes he has spotted the car.
I was driving west on the freeway through the desert, and there's not that much traffic. I saw the car go by eastbound, and I believed it matched the description.
But Chambers cannot see the car's license plate.
I wasn't sure, so I made a U-turn through the center divider and overtook the vehicle and verified the license plate. And it was, in fact, bearing the North Dakota license plate that we had received. El Centro 160 and 84. I think I'm behind the 187 vehicle. Could you send me a backup car?
Suspect in the vehicle looks like the black female driving. 21.
Dispatch advises Officer Chambers that there is no backup immediately available.
880, 10-8, Stevenson 880, 10-8 responding.
Only one unmarked unit races to catch up to the suspects.
That's Sergeant Riley responding to the pursuit, joining pursuit.
Police know the suspects are desperate and probably armed.
2 suspects, the black female driving. We'll attempt to contact DPS.
That's where they know I'm behind them at 60 miles an hour coming up on 186.
10-4 at 60 miles per hour coming up on 186.
But so far, the suspects appear calm as they approach State Route 186.
Report, they're going to head us south on 186 where it looks. They're getting off 186.
10-4 southbound on 186.
Chambers' backup is still several miles behind, racing to catch up. On Route 186, the chase intensifies.
They're not stopping, they're starting to accelerate to 70.
The suspects try to shake Officer Chambers, but he maintains pursuit, even as they escalate to 90 miles an hour.
El Centro, notify YPD and DPS. Looks like we're going to be going north and they go IA eastbound. Proceeding eastbound in Arizona.
The suspects cross into Arizona with Chambers on their heels. Although a California officer outside of his jurisdiction, Chambers continues his pursuit. He relays information to Arizona authorities. Then, the danger increases.
The male passenger did come out of the right front window with a handgun.
They're shooting. They are shooting. Sound like they're shooting.
Chambers stays on them, intent to capture the deadly suspects. As the cars speed toward the town of Yuma, Arizona, dozens of officers listening in race to cover Chambers. October 5th, 1993. California Highway Patrol Officer Richard Chambers engages in a high-speed chase with murder and kidnapping suspects Carolyn King and Bradley Martin. Near El Centro, California, the pursuit crosses into Arizona. Backup is responding. But as the suspects barrel toward the town of Yuma, Arizona, Officer Chambers is on his own and under fire. He knows he must capture the pair before they kill again. The suspects exit onto a smaller road, this one with intersections. Chambers radios their position.
They're going into Yuma now. Get my units out there, back them up.
They run through 2 stop signs without incident. Then, when they crash, the suspects flee on foot.
I got out of my car and drew my pistol and ordered them to stop, and I told them if they didn't stop, I'd shoot, and at that time the female did stop.
Then, Carolyn King orders Martin to stop.
Hey, get down! You, Paul, right there!
And I was able to handcuff the female. I just had one pair of handcuffs with me at the time, and I held the male passenger at gunpoint until Yuma PD arrived. It was probably only a minute or 2, but it seemed longer than that.
When the backup officer arrives, he helps take the suspects into custody.
Put your hands behind your back.
After a 2-week cross-country flight, pursued by police and the FBI, Carolyn King and Bradley Martin have finally been stopped. But investigators' first concern is the safety of the kidnapped woman, Donna Martz. She is not inside the car. On the floorboards lies the handgun Martin fired at Chambers. They open the trunk. Inside, police find duct tape, a knife, and Donna Martz's glasses. But nothing indicating where she is. Martin and King are taken to the Yuma Police Department, but they refuse to tell officers what happened to the kidnapped woman.
You know Donna Martz.
FBI agents arrive and interrogate the suspects separately. Carolyn King is defiant from the start, refusing even to admit her real identity. She claims no knowledge of Donna Martz. Another agent is unsuccessful with Bradley Martin as well. When Special Agent Paul Vick reaches the station, he learns that Martin has refused to talk.
Bradley Martin was pacing back and forth with his hands handcuffed behind him. He appeared to be in some kind of discomfort.
Vick decides to try another approach.
Martin told me that his neck hurt and he had pain extending down into his right arm.
Hoping to win Martin over and get him to cooperate, Vick offers to recuff him in front so he will be more comfortable. His strategy works.
Martin told me that he would speak with me.
The agent reminds Martin he had earlier invoked his right to an attorney, but the suspect says he is now waiving that right. Vick drafts a statement to ensure Martin's waiver will hold up in court.
Once he agreed to that, he signed this piece of paper that I wrote out that he agreed to talk to me, even though he had invoked earlier. After he signed that document, I looked him straight in the eyes and I told him that I knew that he killed somebody in Pennsylvania, but that I wanted to know that Martz was okay. And then I told him, is she okay? And Martin looked at me and he told me, no, I killed her.
Martin says they kept Mrs. Martz for over a week. But after several close calls with police, he decided to get rid of her. They stopped in the Nevada desert. He got her out of the trunk and walked her to a ditch at gunpoint. He says she knew he was going to kill her. She said one thing before he fired, that she loved her children. The news devastates everyone who had hoped to save Donna.
At the conclusion of the interview with Martin, we obtained a map which showed approximately where Martz could be located in Nevada. And we then faxed the map to the Elko, Nevada FBI office, at which time, late at night, a search was initiated to look for Donna Martz's body.
But Martin was doing drugs during his fugitive trek. His memory is unclear and his map inaccurate. Several times during the night, search crews call in for more information. The desert area near Elko, Nevada is hundreds of square miles. The crews do their best searching through the night and into the morning. Then, on October 7th, investigators find the body of Donna Martz about 1.5 miles off Interstate 80.
In a case like the Guy Goodman, Donna Martz homicides, the drive is to keep anyone else from getting hurt. Secondly, it's solving the case, get them off the street and into jail, and then successfully prosecute them.
In Nevada, Martin and King plead guilty to the kidnapping and murder of Donna Martz and receive life sentences. In Pennsylvania, they are found guilty of the murder of Guy Goodman. Both Martin and King are sentenced to death.
This case is an excellent example which showed the interagency cooperation between the FBI and local county and state officials in California, Arizona, North Dakota, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and numerous other states. From working together, we were able to solve this case and apprehend King and Martin and get them convicted.
For Donna Martz's 11 grandchildren, 3 children, family, and friends, the convictions bring a sense of closure. Even today, they are comforted in knowing police and the FBI caught Martin and King before they could claim yet another victim.
10 days before the holidays, in a small Pennsylvania town, a new mother is excited by her baby's first Christmas. But when they disappear without a trace, the holiday turns tragic. Investigators suspect her husband is somehow responsible. But with little evidence, they called on the FBI to find the answers before time ran out for the missing mother and child.
A woman and her infant son vanish. The husband is frantic. The clues are scarce, but hopes linger, even as the hours and days tick by without a word. Was she on the run or the victim of foul play? I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. It was an investigation filled with blind alleys and dead ends. In order to go forward, we had to revisit the past.
Catasauqua, Pennsylvania, 1 hour north of Philadelphia. A quiet, blue-collar town, a safe place to raise a family. By December 15th, 1994, the town was preparing for the holiday season. The house at 740 Front Street was already decorated. Inside, 26-year-old Joanne Katrinak, happily married and a new mother, was especially excited about the holidays. It would be the first Christmas for her 4-month-old son, Alex. Joanne and her mother-in-law, Veronica, planned to spend the day at a nearby mall.
Hey. Yeah.
Now Joanne called to say that Alex was dressed and ready. They'd be right over.
Run away.
Joanne wanted to find the perfect gift for her husband, Andy. They'd been married less than 2 years. And though they didn't have a lot of money, Joanne had been saving for the holiday. Before Joanne had met Andy, she had had some bad relationships. Her first husband was abusive. The marriage had ended in divorce. But she was happy now. Her husband, Andy Katrinak, came home a little after 6 o'clock that evening. He was self-employed as a contractor and sometimes worked long hours. Before he'd met Joanne, Andy had been a confirmed bachelor. But it seemed that finding this kind and beautiful woman had changed his life. Usually, Joanne and Alex were waiting for him when he came home. But not tonight. That didn't seem to worry Andy. After all, it was Christmas time and the mall traffic would be heavy. He saw that Joanne had left some chicken to defrost. He settled in to relax and wait for his family. An hour went by, then another. Still, Andy didn't seem concerned. He watched TV and drank another beer. At 8 p.m., Andy finally decided to check on his wife. His first call was to his mother, Veronica.
Hey, Mom. You seen Joanne?
He knew Joanne had planned to shop with her.
Well, it's,
But now his mother said Joanne had never come by.
No, well, did you
Nor had she answered her phone calls.
Well, no, she didn't. That's why I'm calling you, because I hadn't seen her. I hadn't heard from her yet. No. Well, what'd you guys do?
Veronica was worried. She said she and her husband, Andrew Sr., would be right over. While he waited for his parents, Andy checked the house to see if anything was amiss. In the basement, he found the door leading outside, open. A door he and Joanne never used. The lock had been pried away from the door frame. Andy immediately called the police. Two officers from the Catasauqua Police Department responded. By then, Andy's parents had arrived. Andy told police the events of the day. The shopping trip that never happened. The apparent disappearance of Joanne and little Alex.
Taken this year.
He claimed they had been abducted.
So.
and officers agreed that was a possibility.
She and the baby were supposed to pick me up.
But it was also
we got that
plausible
done
that
last
Joanne
month.
had left on her own and taken her child with her.
Well, yeah.
Or maybe Andy had somehow been involved.
She didn't hear from her. She was supposed to meet with her.
Veronica described her phone call with Joanne and the subsequent calls that went unanswered.
I had my coat on and waited, and she never showed up.
Here, you guys see this?
Andy now showed police the padlock that had been broken off the basement door.
Yeah.
But the officers were not convinced it was related to the missing mother and child. That night, Andy stayed home by the phone while his father searched the surrounding area for Joanne and Alex. At 3 in the morning, Andrew Sr. had found something and brought his son to see it.
What is this?
Joanne's tan Toyota was backed into a spot in the parking lot of McCarty's Tavern,
What is this?
down the street from the Katrinak's home.
That's her keys, Andy.
Inside were Joanne's keys and her small canister of mace. Again, Andy called Catasauqua police. This time, police suspected foul play. But the local force lacked the resources and experience needed to lead the investigation. So they contacted Pennsylvania state troopers for assistance. With the possibility of an abduction, Major Robert Wirtz looked to the most likely suspect, Joanne's husband, Andy Katrinak.
There was a lot of looking into the family life and looking at what Andrew did on that particular day and those sorts of things. One of the things that you're always forced to do in these types of investigations is look at family members.
State police arrived at Andy's house the next morning.
You see that right there?
Andy told them that overnight he had noticed something else. A cut phone line in the basement.
Crime scene down here?
One of 2 separate phone lines in the house.
And I left it for you.
The one cut serviced the cordless phone, while the other serviced the kitchen phone. It appeared to investigators that whoever cut the line knew where to look and which one to cut. State police evidence technicians also found a partial boot print on the basement floor and tool marks on the door frame where the padlock was pried off.
Laundry upstairs. No, she didn't come down.
As crime scene technicians checked the house, they found nothing to remove suspicion from Andy. In the master bedroom, there was no indication Joanne had packed for a long trip. Andy confirmed that his wife's clothes all seemed to be in the closet, and the couple's suitcases were under the bed where he said they always kept them. Technicians found no blood or other signs of foul play. They dusted for fingerprints around the room's entry points, but found only Andy's and Joanne's. In the baby's room, there were also no signs that little Alex had been taken on a long trip, and no indication of a struggle or robbery. At the state police barracks garage, evidence technicians processed Joanne's car. They hoped something left behind could lead them closer to the missing mother and child. On the headrest of the driver's seat, they found 6 dirty blonde hairs. One was partially smeared with a dark red substance, maybe blood. But nothing immediately pointed to Joanne and Alex's whereabouts. As lead investigator, Trooper Bob Egan was suspicious of the way the car had been found.
There were a couple things that led Andy Katrinak to believe that his wife did not back that car, and number one is that she never used that parking lot to park her vehicle. They had a parking lot in back of their house, and number two, she never backed the car in. When she parked into a parking space, she always pulled in front of the vehicle first. She was very bad at backing up.
3 days had passed since Andy's wife and son disappeared. His parents posted flyers throughout his neighborhood and in Catasauqua's shopping district.
Tell me, have you seen this woman before the baby?
Anywhere Joanne and Alex might have
Sorry, I
visited.
have not.
This is a picture of our daughter-in-law. This is our grandchild.
With still no word from Joanne or a kidnapper, troopers delved further into Andy's background.
Anything like that? No, I just got
They found him anxious when he spoke of his former days as a semi-pro boxer in Las Vegas.
You guys have breakfast together? No,
He was good with his fists and earned his living as an instructor when he first moved to Pennsylvania. Now a private contractor, Andy barely made enough to pay the bills. A wife, a house, and a baby strained the new father's resources. Troopers asked to see his financial records, including insurance documents, bank statements, and phone records.
I got some checks.
He told them that his wife had only minimal life insurance.
I know you probably would have wanted phone records, so I brought that down too.
On the day she disappeared with his son, Andy said he had been with his father, building a room addition for a client who lived a few miles from his home. Troopers were not satisfied. They suspected he may have still been hiding something. They demanded that Andy take a polygraph test.
Right now, do you know where your wife is located?
No, I don't.
The first test showed that Andy had not been deceptive regarding his family's disappearance. But investigators needed to be sure. So they tested him again.
No, I didn't.
The results were conclusive.
No.
Andy was telling the truth about his missing wife and baby.
Are you
Investigators cleared the husband as a suspect.
No, I'm not.
By now, Joanne and Alex had been missing for 4 days, and investigators still had no solid leads. Whether it had been a desertion or an abduction, it was possible the woman and child had crossed state lines. On December 19, 1994, state police called on the FBI for help. Special Agent Dave Rowe from the FBI's Allentown office joined the effort.
We began our investigation by identifying, locating, and interviewing virtually all of the relatives, virtually all of the friends, former work colleagues, anybody and everybody who was either related to or acquainted with Andy, Joanne, and Alex.
Open. Coffee? Yes, thank you.
Local, state, and federal agencies funneled their resources into the search for the missing woman and child. 6 days before Christmas, it seemed as if they had vanished without a trace. Joanne Katranak, a 26-year-old mother, and her 4-month-old son, Alex, had mysteriously disappeared from their Catasauqua, Pennsylvania home. Her husband, Andy, had been cleared of suspicion. Now investigators traveled across Pennsylvania state lines to question Joanne's ex-husband, who lived and worked in New Jersey. Mike Jack had married Joanne in 1991. They were divorced just a few months later, amidst allegations that Jack was abusive. Maybe Joanne had decided to rekindle the relationship. Or perhaps her ex had come to win her back. But investigators found Jack had a solid alibi for the date of Joanne's disappearance. Agents also pursued people from Andy's past,
What are you doing here? Well,
including his ex-girlfriend, Pat Rohrer.
December 14th.
Anything wrong?
An FBI agent interviewed Rohrer at her home in North Carolina.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I keep all
He
kinds
found
of
she too had a solid alibi for
Take me
the
a
day
little while to
Joanne
get
and
my
Alex had vanished.
I'll tell you what, I really appreciate that, man.
Okay.
Back in Catasauqua, investigators returned to McCarty's Tavern, where Joanne's car had been found the day she had disappeared. Maybe someone had noticed her, or whoever had parked the car. Troopers and agents eventually interviewed everyone who had been at the bar that night, but no one had seen a thing.
You working last Thursday night?
Yes, I was.
Investigators also canvassed the Katrinack neighborhood. One neighbor directed them to a handyman who rented a room down the street. He'd done repair work in several local homes. Detectives soon discovered he had a criminal record for breaking and entering. He seemed a promising suspect. He admitted to police he had had some run-ins with the law, but swore he had no knowledge of Joanne and Alex's disappearance. He agreed to come in for further questioning. Investigators learned the handyman lived in a lean-to by a river near the Katrinack's house during the summer months. A state police canine team searched the shelter for any evidence that Joanne and Alex had been there. They found nothing, and the handyman was cleared. Another dead end. For frustrated investigators, precious time slipped away as community concern grew.
Man.
State Police Major Robert Wirtz helped establish hotlines to elicit the public's help.
There was obviously a lot of concerns in the community as to what occurred. So we had a command post set up here at the barracks with a number of telephone lines coming into the command post. Those phone numbers were given to the public, and we in fact did get information from the public.
Reports of sightings poured in. One resident reported seeing Joanne with an unidentified man near railroad tracks behind the Katrinack's home. She was carrying a baby and seemed frightened by the man pulling her further into the brush against her will. In response, FBI agents and state police immediately conducted a massive line search of a 4-mile stretch near the railroad tracks. The search continued through the night. They scanned the area inch by inch as choppers circled overhead. But again, investigators found nothing. Trooper Joe Kosovar, now co-lead investigator with his partner Bob Egan, recalls that reports of sightings continued.
They saw her along the railroad tracks, they saw her on an airplane, they saw her in a convenience store with the baby, but none of them checked out. They were false leads, and apparently people who they saw and thought they saw were two different people.
Christmas passed and spring began, with still no word of Joanne and Alex. Then on April 9th, a farmer was tilling his field in Heidelberg Township, 15 miles northwest of Catasauqua. He saw what looked like a pile of clothes at the field's edge. When he walked over to investigate, he encountered a horrifying sight. Human remains. Four months after the disappearance of Joanne Katrinack and her infant son, Alex, a farmer found the decaying bodies of a mother and child at the edge of his Pennsylvania field. The FBI and troopers arrived immediately. Dental records would later confirm what they already suspected. The bodies were Alex and Joanne Katrinack's. Joanne lay on her back, a diaper bag still on her shoulder. She had been shot once in the head and beaten about the face. Alex was face down on his mother's stomach, dressed in the blue snowsuit he'd worn on his ill-fated trip to meet his grandmother. The bodies were 50 feet past the end of a trail that ran through the woods. Nearby, crime scene technicians found a baby bottle and a rattle. To Trooper Bob Egan, the location of the items was significant.
You could see items that had
had fallen to the ground, almost in a sequence as if an assault started, and Joanne was walking or running away from the assault, and she was dropping items along the way.
It appeared the killer had driven up to the end of the trail, and from there had forced Joanne to walk the remaining 50 feet. Evidence technicians would spend 15 hours searching the area, but they found no shell casings, fingerprints, footprints, or murder weapons. In the hopes that the forest debris might yield answers, they collected leaves and dirt from beneath the bodies and sent them to the police lab for closer examination. For Major Robert Wirtz and the others who'd worked the case for months, the finality of this brutal murder evoked a barrage of emotions.
When the bodies were found, there was a period of time there when it was very difficult for the officers that were assigned to this investigation. Took it very personally, and it was hard, because I think they were holding out hope that, she was going to be found alive.
With the mysterious disappearance officially deemed a homicide, the case remained under state jurisdiction. But the FBI never stopped actively assisting.
Hello, Linda. Dave Rowe here. The fact that somebody would abduct a new mother and a 4-month-old infant, everybody can identify with that. And once you become aware of that, you want to be part of the investigation.
An autopsy revealed that Joanne had been shot once with a .22 caliber bullet and beaten 19 times with a blunt object. The fact that there had been 2 modes of attack was a telling clue for Trooper Joe Kosovar.
Based on the absence of empty shell casings and the fact that the victim had received 1 shot and numerous blows to the head, led me to believe that the gun malfunctioned.
The medical examiner was unable to determine exactly how baby Alex was killed, whether he'd been suffocated or left to die of exposure. Police continued to analyze the physical evidence found at the crime scene. To help build the case, they brought in prosecutor Mike McIntyre of the Lehigh County District Attorney's Office.
We found 2 more hairs that first match the 6 hairs found on that headrest in color and length.
But the hairs would have to be examined forensically to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that they matched. A Pennsylvania State Police forensic scientist conducted the lab analysis. The results confirmed what investigators had suspected. The hairs belonged to the same person. And the substance on one of them was determined to be human blood, containing DNA consistent with Joanne's. But to whom did the hairs belong? Tests quickly ruled out the Katrinacs and several of Joanne's friends who had access to the car. Pennsylvania State Police were baffled.
How far are we on this?
Again, they turned to the FBI for help. The FBI sent a behavioral profiler from Washington, D.C. A profiler can help narrow the search for suspects by detailing the type of person responsible for a crime through that person's behavioral characteristics. Profilers study a variety of crime-related information, including case reports, geography, timing, and the victim's habits. Then they revisit the crime scenes to read the locations for clues to the killer's behavior. Investigators first took the profiler to the place the bodies were found. He would look for anything that might reveal the killer's signature. The area was so far from the abduction site, the profiler was convinced the killer had been here before. The profiler also hypothesized the killer had been male because the attack had been so brutal. The abduction had taken place in broad daylight, which offered another hint. The killer would be someone comfortable being seen in the small town of Catasauqua, and someone who perhaps knew the family's habits and the layout of the house. By fleshing out this portrait of the killer, the profiler gave investigators new direction in a frustrating case. But troopers needed a name that fit the profile. To find that name, troopers drove Andy around Heidelberg Township, close to where the bodies were found. They hoped to prompt his memory of someone who knew this rural area. They asked if Joanne had ever visited here. Was there a friend or a family member who lived nearby? Andy could think of no one. Disappointed, investigators returned to State Police headquarters. Then, just as Andy was about to leave, he remembered something. He did know someone who knew Heidelberg Township, and also his home in Catasauqua. His ex-girlfriend, Pat Rohrer, had once managed a stable in Heidelberg.
And with that, he tells me that he couldn't tell me the exact place, what it was called, because he couldn't remember the name, but he could give me directions on how to get there. So I told him, I said, well, tell me. As he started to tell me the directions of how to get to where Patty Rohrer was boarding a horse and taking care of horses, well, I knew he was taking me right to the area where Joanne and the baby were found.
We used to go together.
Pat Rohrer and Andy had lived together briefly in Pennsylvania. He told investigators he once visited her at the stable. But they'd broken up in 1989, and she had moved back to North Carolina.
How you been? Yeah? It's all right.
Then in the spring of 1991, before Andy met Joanne, Rohrer had visited him unexpectedly after a fight with her most recent boyfriend. Andy was sympathetic. He let Rohrer stay for a few days, though their relationship remained purely a friendship.
Tell me about it.
Then she returned to North Carolina.
Fresno Road.
Not long after that, Andy met Joanne.
We lived together for a while.
As he now told state troopers, it was love at first sight. They were married soon after, in the spring of 1993. They agreed they wanted children, and less than a year later, Joanne was pregnant.
Hey, sweetie.
Hey, baby.
Alex was born in August of 1994.
That you think is so adorable? Yeah. You know what, I think it's...
Now Andy
he's
told
just
investigators about something that had happened 3 days before his wife and son disappeared.
I will. Hello?
On December 12th, Joanne answered a phone call.
May I tell him who's calling?
It was Pat Rohrer.
It's her. Pat.
What does she want?
What do you think she wants?
Joanne told Rohrer that Andy was married now and that they had a baby. She told Rohrer not to call again.
Please, don't
Then
call us.
Joanne hung up on her.
I used to date a girl.
Though Andy knew Pat had a temper, he dismissed the idea that she might seek revenge.
Go together.
Then the investigation took an unexpected turn. A second mother and child were found brutally murdered. The pair, who resembled Joanne and Alex, were discovered in a retail store dressing room in nearby Collegeville, Pennsylvania. Investigators now wondered if a serial killer was on the loose, preying on mothers and children in Pennsylvania. While investigating the homicide of Joanne and Alex Katrinak, Pennsylvania State Police responded to another double murder in a retail store just 45 miles away. The victims were a second young mother and her baby. Police feared a serial killer was on the prowl. They quickly arrested the suspect, the store owner's son. While he confessed to this killing, he had an airtight alibi for the day Joanne and Alex were slain. Now police turned their attention to Andy Katranak's ex-girlfriend, Pat Rohrer.
Yeah, we got a couple things to run down.
Rohrer was a long shot, a brunette instead of a blonde, and a woman, though the profiler believed the murderer was male. But she was familiar with both the abduction and murder sites. Then Trooper Joe Kosovar recalled that he'd worked on a case that was strangely similar. He phoned Special Agent Dave Rowe.
Trooper Joe Kosovar recollected that he had investigated a homicide some years earlier where the cause of death was blunt force blows to the head. The assailant was determined to be a woman, while 1, 2, 3, 4 blows by an adult male would produce the same damage that a woman might have to strike 15, 20, 25 blows to accomplish.
Joanne Katranak had sustained 19 blows. But could a woman have killed her and her infant as well? In May of 1995, 6 months after the murders, troopers Bob Egan and Joe Kosovar traveled to North Carolina. The FBI had helped coordinate a meeting with the Lexington County Sheriff's Office. Together, authorities from the 2 states would interview Pat Rohrer at her attorney's office. Rohrer's mother was also there.
You exercise the horses. Can you tell us more?
Rohrer expanded upon her original alibis. On December 15th, the day of the crime, she said she'd visited a local tanning salon. That evening, she'd taken her regular Thursday night dance lesson at the Cowboys Nightlife bar.
Why'd you guys split up?
Rohrer admitted she'd worked at the stable in Heidelberg Township, but said she hadn't been back to Pennsylvania since she'd visited Andy after the fight with her boyfriend. She also swore she'd never owned a gun. Lieutenant Tony Roberson of the Lexington County Sheriff's Department helped agents and troopers investigate her statements.
The first thing that they wanted to do was discredit her alibis to find out whether they could be corroborated or whether they could be found to be invalid.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Investigators visited the tanning salon Rohrer claimed to have used on the day of the murders. Prosecutor Mike McIntyre remembers this alibi quickly proved false.
The owner of the tanning salon, Mrs. Simerson, said, hey, you know what? Something's wrong here, because we were closed on that particular day that Pat Rohrer says she was in getting a tan, because that's my husband's birthday, and we were over at the shopping mart in some city about 50 miles away, and I remember that, and I have a receipt for you from the shopping mall to show that we were there.
Excuse me, sir.
At the Cowboys Nightlife bar, the dance instructor knew Rohrer as a regular.
We're investigating a murder up in Pennsylvania, and we understand that...
The club's sign-in sheet showed she'd been there the Thursday before December 15th and the Thursday after, but not on the 15th.
And she was there.
Investigators secured Rohrer's phone records. They showed she'd used the phone every day of December 1994. Except from the 12th through the 15th. Despite her alibis, Rohrer could not prove she'd been in North Carolina on the day of the killings. More incriminating still, her police record revealed a history of violence.
She has violent tendencies, has had them in the past. She was charged in a neighboring county, in Forsyth County, of getting into a fight over a man at a bar. And she was arrested that night.
But investigators were still missing one key piece of evidence, the murder weapon. Rohrer continued to deny she'd ever owned a gun. But investigators kept digging. At a North Carolina stable, they found one of her ex-boyfriends, Walter Blaylock. He distinctly remembered that Rohrer had bought a handgun for $50 at a yard sale. It was a .22 caliber Jennings, which they had used for target shooting in Rohrer's backyard.
You put your hands on me, girl!
The last time he had seen it was during an intense argument.
Calm down, Pat! I'm not gonna calm down! Don't do something foolish! Please! Settle down! Put a gun down!
Now Blaylock told Trooper Egan the gun had a curious flaw.
He went on to describe the handgun as being a junky piece of junk type of handgun that often after the first time you shot it, it jammed, not allowing you to fire a second shot. Now this fed into the theory why somebody would be shot once and then beaten about the head.
The FBI helped coordinate interstate efforts to secure a probable cause warrant to search Rohrer's North Carolina home for the murder weapon. They arrived with the warrant on July 24th, 1995.
Search your house, man.
What are you doing here?
Have a warrant.
Despite a thorough search, they didn't find the gun. But they did find numerous spent .22 caliber shell casings in the backyard.
State Police. Detective Egan, Detective Kosovar, ma'am.
Only when police told Rohrer that they knew she owned a handgun did she admit to it.
Gun in my house.
But she insisted Blaylock had taken it with him when he'd moved out about a month before the murders.
No, I have not.
Why did you buy the gun?
I told you.
The case against Rohrer was
with
growing,
him,
but it was built on circumstantial evidence.
It's just because he wanted this gun.
Did you get it?
And strangely, the only physical evidence, the hairs from the car and the murder site, didn't seem to fit. The hairs were dirty blonde. Rohrer's hair was brown. Trooper Joe Kosovar wondered if it could have been dyed at the time of the killings. He learned that shortly before the murders, Rohrer had ridden in a rodeo competition and won. Kosovar contacted the event organizers, hoping they'd taken a photo of her. His inquiry paid off. They sent him the photo. As he'd guessed, Rohrer's hair was dirty blonde.
The photograph was given to our crime lab personnel, and they compared the color of the photograph of the hair with the color of the hairs that were found in the vehicle and decided that they should further investigate those hairs.
Detectives obtained a warrant to collect blood and hair samples from Pat Rohrer. If evidence analysts could match her hair to those from Joanne's car on the murder site, the troopers could make their arrest. But they would need to rely on a test so new that it would take more than a year for the test to be approved. Until then, the prime suspect of the double murder would remain free. After an investigation that had lasted almost a year, detectives had a strong suspect in the double murder of Joanne Katranak and her infant son Alex. With a search warrant, they obtained blood and hair samples from Pat Rohrer, the former girlfriend of Joanne's husband, Andy. Rohrer was now pregnant with the child of her current boyfriend. Forensic scientists would attempt to match her hair samples with hair found at the crime scenes. The Pennsylvania State Police Lab determined Rohrer's hairs were microscopically consistent with the recovered hairs. But investigators needed more proof, a match at the cellular level. They extracted Rohrer's DNA sequence from her blood samples and attempted to compare it with the DNA and hairs from the crime scenes. But there was a problem making a match. Joseph DeZino, Unit Chief of the DNA Analysis Unit 2 at the FBI lab, explains.
When hairs are found at a crime scene, they're normally naturally shed hairs that don't have much tissue upon the root. And if they don't have much tissue upon the root, there's very, very little DNA contained in those hairs. And therefore, our experience has shown us that nuclear DNA analysis will fail.
In this case, only one of the hairs found at the crime scene contained enough skin tissue necessary for nuclear DNA analysis. But there was a great risk. To conduct the test, examiners would have to destroy that sample. If the test was inconclusive, there was no way to repeat the process. They needed a way to test the other hairs that held no skin tissue. A possible solution lay in a new process being pioneered by the FBI lab in Washington, D.C. Mitochondrial DNA testing.
This was brand new. To my knowledge, this was the first forensics laboratory in the United States to bring this new analysis online.
Because the test was so new, it would take more than a year to be certain the results could be scientifically reliable. Mitochondrial DNA testing uses the DNA contained in the cell's mitochondria, or organelles. Since there is more mitochondrial DNA than nuclear DNA in hair cells, it is easier for examiners to retrieve the mitochondrial DNA. With 5 hair samples to test, examiners could repeat the test and obtain more reliable results.
With mitochondrial DNA analysis, we're over 90% successful obtaining DNA from hairs that are naturally shed, hairs without root. And we only need about 1 inch of hair in order to obtain a result, generally speaking.
To attempt a mitochondrial DNA match, first the DNA sequence in a hair cell's mitochondria is isolated. Then its sequence is plotted and compared to the suspect's known DNA sequence, in this case taken from Pat Rohrer's blood cells. Both DNA sequences matched. Forensic scientist Joseph DeZino explains what that meant.
If a hair from a crime scene is found to have the same mitochondrial DNA type as a blood sample from a suspect, our reports state that that suspect cannot be excluded as a source of that hair from the crime scene. Therefore, Patricia Rohrer could not be excluded as a source of these hairs.
However, without nuclear DNA confirmation, the result was not absolutely conclusive. Now scientists examined the hair sample with skin for a nuclear DNA match. It corroborated the mitochondrial match. There was no question that Patricia Rohrer had left those hairs behind. It was a pivotal moment in the case. In the early morning of June 24, 1997, investigators arrived at Rohrer's home with an arrest warrant.
Pat Rohrer, I've got a warrant for your arrest. I need you to come with us, ma'am, please.
Yes?
Deputy, go with him.
A female detective followed Rohrer upstairs to keep an eye on her as she dressed herself and her 18-month-old daughter. It seemed a routine safety precaution, but it yielded some of the most damaging evidence in the case.
During the time that Pat was trying to settle her baby down and get dressed, the female detective, Suzanne Pearson, was present in the bedroom. And it was at this time that she overheard a conversation that Pat Rohrer had with her baby. Pat's baby's name is Nicole, and what the detective overheard was Pat Rohrer saying to Nicole, Nicole, if I would have known I was going to get caught, I would have never brought you into this world. It was something that Suzanne Pearson, the detective, documented as soon as possible, and this was very damaging.
More than 3 years after the murder of Joanne Katranak and her baby, Pat Rohrer was finally under arrest. She was flown to Pennsylvania to face murder charges. Preparing for trial, prosecutors pieced together the terrifying events of Joanne and Alex Katranak's last day. On December 15, 1994, Pat Rohrer had broken into the basement of the Katranak's home, knowing Andy was out and Joanne was alone with Alex. Joanne had no idea Rora was downstairs as she called her mother-in-law and packed up baby Alex for a shopping trip.
Right.
From the basement, Rora heard every word Joanne said.
All right, I'll see you in a bit. Bye.
And she remembered the house from a visit with Andy 3 years earlier. She knew where to look for the 2 phone lines and which one to cut so Joanne couldn't call for help. Joanne carried Alex outside, still unaware that Pat was in the house. Rora heard Joanne leave and went outside to catch up with her. Joanne didn't see Rora sneak up behind her, carrying a .22 caliber Jennings.
Oh, get in the car. Oh my God. Get in the car.
Rora jumped into the back seat with the baby and forced Joanne to drive. Joanne must have been terrified as she drove with Rora's gun at her head, afraid for herself, and more so for her helpless 4-month-old baby. Rora directed Joanne to an obscure horse trail in Heidelberg Township. As Rora forced her further into the woods, Joanne in her terror dropped Alex's rattle and then his bottle. Rora fired once, but then her gun jammed, and she began bludgeoning Joanne. She may have suffocated baby Alex, or simply left him to die slowly of exposure to the December elements. Then Rora parked the car at McCarty's Tavern and fled from Pennsylvania. Prosecutors built an airtight case, using evidence investigators had meticulously collected. It was a concerted effort by many in law enforcement, unwilling to let this woman and child perish in silence.
As investigators, we have a responsibility, and that responsibility is to be the voice of the victim, is to gather the information and speak for the victims that can no longer speak.
Close 6.
The jury found Pat Rora guilty of 2 counts of kidnapping and 2 of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole. Legally, the case was closed, and for the town of Catasauqua, the mystery was solved. If not for the advanced forensic technology of the FBI, this brutal double murderer might still be free.